We do not possess that much capital readily available. Emily, you must approach this circumstance with realism. My father stood blocking the entrance to my apartment, his arms folded, his expression severe. Adjacent to him, my mother signaled her agreement with a confirming nod, her mouth compressed into a narrow line of disapproval. I remained standing there while my 7-year-old son, Ethan, slept in the adjoining room. His breathing was strained despite the continuous operation of the oxygen apparatus. The accumulated medical invoices were scattered across my kitchen table, functioning like indictments of my failures. $85,000. That was the precise figure the physician had mentioned for the experimental treatment that held the potential to save Ethan's existence. His unusual heart ailment was no longer responding positively to established conventional therapies, and the time remaining for him was rapidly diminishing. My personal identification is Emily, and I am 31 years old. I reside in Columbus, Ohio, maintaining employment as a middle school science educator while undertaking the solo responsibility of raising Ethan. His biological father departed when Ethan received his diagnosis at 3 years old, citing his inability to cope with having a child who was unwell. That incident occurred 4 years earlier, and I had been fighting this struggle entirely by myself since then. My parents resided only 20 minutes away in their pleasant suburban residence, the very dwelling where my younger sister Claire still had her childhood bedroom maintained exactly like a sacred memorial. Realistic, I reiterated, my vocal cords catching. My child faces death if he does not receive this medical procedure. The physician projected he has perhaps half a year left if immediate action is not taken. My mother advanced closer, placing her hand on my father's arm in the characteristic manner she employed when attempting to soften his declarations, yet unwilling to outright contradict him. Darling, we recognize this situation is stressful, but we have already provided you with substantial assistance throughout the years. We covered the expenses for 3 of his surgical procedures. We cannot simply deplete our retirement savings entirely. I am not requesting you liquidate them. I am requesting a monetary advance. I pledge to reimburse every single dollar. I will obtain a second job. I will undertake whatever actions are necessary. My father shook his head side to side. Emily, you are barely managing financially as things stand. How exactly would you afford to repay us? Be reasonable. Alternative methods exist, like deferred payment arrangements or medical financing schemes. You ought to investigate those avenues. I had already investigated them comprehensively. I had devoted several weeks to researching every conceivable option. The installment plans required too lengthy a time frame. Ethan did not possess years in which to wait. The medical loan organizations demanded interest rates that would financially burden me for numerous decades, and furthermore, most would decline my application in any case because I was already overwhelmed by medical debt. I've pursued every other available option, I stated softly. You represent my final resource. My mother's expression momentarily eased, and for a short instant I believed she might persuade my father. However, he subsequently spoke once more, his tone resolute. We are unable to provide the funds, Emily. I regret this, but we must also prioritize contemplation of our own future welfare. We are not becoming younger. They exited soon thereafter, and I remained by the window, observing their vehicle retreat from sight. The burdensome realization of their refusal settled upon me like a restrictive cover. I entered Ethan's room and sat down adjacent to his bedside, listening to the monotonous low noise of the oxygen machine. His diminutive chest rose and fell with irregularity. He appeared so tranquil while asleep, completely oblivious that his own paternal grandparents had just determined his destiny. I initiated communication with people the subsequent day. I contacted every relative I could recall, including distant cousins, my mother's female siblings, and anyone potentially capable of offering assistance. Most family members offered their empathy and insignificant sums of currency that would yield no practical effect. My cousin Teresa transmitted $500, accompanied by a brief message expressing her desire for the amount to be larger. I valued every monetary unit, yet I was attempting the equivalent of filling an enormous ocean using merely a teaspoon. 2 weeks later, I returned home following an especially trying day, teaching at the school, only to discover Ethan struggling significantly to draw breath. His lips possessed a bluish tint, which triggered intense panic throughout my being. I immediately dialed emergency services, and they rapidly transported him to the hospital facility. The attending physician managed to stabilize his condition, but the cardiologist subsequently requested a private word with me, maintaining a serious countenance. His medical condition is deteriorating at a pace quicker than our estimations, Dr. Morrison disclosed. Without the specialized procedure we previously discussed, I would gauge that he has 3 months maximum, possibly a shorter duration. I responded with an emotionless nod, unable to utter words past the constricted feeling in my throat. 3 months? My infant son had a maximum of 3 months unless I could successfully secure $85,000. I launched a public fundraising campaign that very evening, dedicating my deepest emotions to the description provided and uploading pictures of Ethan's cheerful grin from before his illness became so severe. Friends shared the campaign widely, teachers employed at my school contributed funds, and even some parents of my students made donations. But subsequent to 2 weeks, I had only managed to accumulate $12,000. It was nowhere near sufficient. Subsequently, the phone call arrived from Claire. My sister's vocal sound was effervescing with excitement. "Emily, I have the most astounding announcement. Jeffrey proposed marriage. We are planning a wedding." I endeavored to summon genuine enthusiasm despite the oppressive sensation in my chest cavity. "That is truly fantastic, Claire. Congratulations to you both, I know, isn't it? And both Mom and Dad are demonstrating such unbelievable generosity. They are funding the entirety of the nuptial ceremony. Can you even grasp that? They specified we are permitted to have absolutely anything we desire. There are no limits imposed on the spending plan. Jeffrey and I are contemplating a wedding celebration held overseas, perhaps Italy or the southern region of France. Oh, Emily, it is guaranteed to be completely flawless." My grasp tightened around the telephone receiver. No restrictions on the spending plan? Absolutely none. Dad articulated that this represents his baby daughter's monumental event and that no extravagance is excessive. We are scheduled to consult with wedding planning professionals next week. The actual wedding event will not take place for an additional 12 months, but we are keen to commence organization now to ensure we secure exactly what we envision. I stood motionless in my compact apartment hospital paperwork, stacked high on every horizontal surface, my son struggling for every gasp of air in the adjacent room, and listened as my sister raved effusively about her limitless wedding expenditure capability. A sensation, cold and unyielding, began to form inside my chest, a nascent realization that would firmly establish itself and expand throughout the ensuing months. The subsequent months blurred together into a rapid sequence of medical facility visits and escalating hopelessness. I leveraged every credit card I possessed to its maximum limit, procured personal loans subject to exploitative interest rates, and sold every object of monetary worth I owned. My grandmother's ring, which represented the sole heirloom from my own mother that had been entrusted to me, was exchanged at a pawn shop for $800. My motor vehicle was downgraded to an old sedan, 15 years in age, which barely functioned reliably. I relocated from my single-bedroom residence to a studio apartment in order to reduce monthly rental costs. Throughout this entire period, Claire's preparations for the wedding proceeded like an inevitable, overwhelming, natural occurrence. Every family meal, every telephone conversation, every social exchange somehow invariably reverted back to discussions regarding the wedding celebration. My parents were fully engrossed by it, attending food tastings at costly eateries, conducting virtual tours of potential locations in Tuscany via video conferencing, and debating floral arrangements whose price exceeded my total monthly compensation. I made an effort to genuinely be happy for Claire. I truly did exert that effort. She was my younger sibling, and there was a prior period when our relationship was intimate. However, that closeness had progressively diminished over the years as it became obvious that our parents maintained drastically divergent perspectives regarding us both. Claire represented the privileged, flawless daughter, the one who executed every task correctly. She finished her university education with academic distinctions, secured a prestigious position at a marketing corporation, and exclusively dated suitable young men originating from respected lineages. I was the individual who became pregnant at 23 years old by a man who ultimately proved to be insignificant, who opted for a career in teaching rather than a more financially rewarding profession, who furthermore lacked the ability to even maintain the health of her own child. One evening during the month of July, my mother telephoned me. "Emily, my dear, we must have a discussion concerning the upcoming wedding." What specifically about the wedding? I was completely exhausted, having recently completed instructing a summer school session and having spent 3 hours accompanying Ethan at the hospital facility. "Well, Claire certainly intends for you to participate as a bridesmaid naturally, but the required gowns will cost approximately $300 apiece, and we need you to place your order for yours shortly." $300? I performed the calculation mentally. That sum approximated the expense for 2 weeks' worth of Ethan's necessary medications. "I am uncertain if I can manage that expenditure right now." A period of silence ensued. "Emily, this represents your sister's significant day." I grasped that, but my current financial circumstances are exceedingly strained. Ethan's accrued medical expenses. You are perpetually referencing Ethan's medical invoices." My mother interrupted, her voice acquiring a sharper tone. "I comprehend that he is unwell, yet existence proceeds for the remainder of us. This is Claire's specific celebration. I close my sight. May I reflect upon this? The final date for submitting the order is scheduled for the subsequent week. Claire is absolutely determined to include you as part of the bridal party. Subsequent to disconnecting the call, I remained seated in the deep gloom of my studio apartment and wept uncontrollably. How had events progressed to this point? How had my immediate family become so oblivious to the realities transpiring? My son was facing imminent death, and their primary preoccupation was selecting bridesmaid attire and finalizing seating arrangements. Ethan's physical state continued its downward trajectory. The experimental medical intervention was now no longer a viable choice. We had exceeded the crucial time frame. The medical professionals transitioned to providing palliative comfort care, focusing solely on maintaining his ease. Daily, I observed my child fading incrementally, his inherently cheerful temperament diminishing concurrently with his physical power. He ceased inquiring about when he might be able to resume school attendance. He stopped discussing his ambition to become a scientific researcher upon reaching adulthood. He understood through the inherent intuition children somehow possess that his remaining span of existence was expiring. I initiated a temporary absence from my teaching role to dedicate my time to him. My school principal was understanding of the situation, but the leave was without pay, which meant my already unstable economic situation quickly devolved into a total disaster. I submitted applications for every governmental assistance program, every charitable grant, every benevolent organization I could locate. The majority featured waiting periods spanning several months or maintained qualifying criteria that I could not meet. In September, 5 full months following my parents' refusal to lend their support, Claire's bridal shower occurred. My mother called to provide me with a complete account of the event. They had leased a substantial house in Napa Valley for the duration of the weekend. 12 of Claire's closest acquaintances attended, with all costs covered entirely by our parents, including guided wine tastings, luxurious spa treatments, and a dedicated private chef. It was unequivocally enchanting, my mother gushed enthusiastically. Claire demonstrated immense happiness. You should truly have witnessed the joy on her face. What was the exact expenditure, I asked, unable to restrain the inquiry. Oh, I cannot specify the exact total. Your father oversaw all those financial aspects. Perhaps $10,000. But it was unquestionably worth every cent to witness Claire experiencing such pleasure. $10,000, a sum exceeding 1/10 of the funds that could have rescued Ethan, utilized for a single weekend gathering. I perceived an internal fracture occurring within me, a fundamental principle of family loyalty that I had desperately clung to in spite of all adversities. That sounds perfectly lovely, I commented in a monotone. You know, Emily, I genuinely wish you would endeavor to exhibit greater enthusiasm regarding this wedding. Claire feels as though you are not genuinely endorsing her. I produced a laugh, a sharp noise that surprised even myself. Claire feels I am failing to endorse her? Indeed she does. She has observed that you have been distant, and you still have not confirmed whether you intend to serve as a bridesmaid. I lack the financial resources to purchase the gown, Mom. I communicated that fact to you. Well, possibly if you had managed your monetary resources more effectively, you would not constantly find yourself in this predicament. The words remained suspended in the atmosphere like toxic fumes. Manage my financial resources more effectively, as though I had been spending without consideration instead of actively battling to preserve my child's survival, as though the overwhelming oppression of medical debt represented some form of individual failure rather than the outcome of a compromised healthcare infrastructure and a family that prioritized extravagant celebratory events over the survival of their own grandson. I need to conclude this call, I stated. Ethan requires my presence. Naturally he does, my mother replied, and I distinctly heard the implicit criticism hidden within her tone. You know, Emily, perhaps if you were not perpetually preoccupied with Ethan's difficulties, you might be capable of appreciating life more fully. Claire manages to successfully maintain a harmonious balance across all aspects of her life. I terminated the call without uttering a farewell. October brought with it a sudden drop in temperature that appeared to penetrate deep into my skeletal structure. Ethan was intermittently admitted and discharged from the hospital, his small physical form engaged in a conflict it could not ultimately emerge victorious from. The medical doctor communicated in hushed, serious tones about periods measured in mere weeks, not months. I devoted every available second to remaining adjacent to his bed, reading aloud his preferred publications, narrating imaginative accounts about the potential nature of heaven, clasping his hand firmly throughout moments of acute suffering. My parents made sporadic visits, typically coinciding with their route to or return from some obligation associated with the wedding planning. They would linger for approximately 20 minutes, pat Ethan's hand in an awkward fashion, and then depart with looks of palpable relief on their faces. It was agonizing to witness their unease when confronted with their dying grandson. Difficult to perceive their eagerness to retreat back into the more joyous realm of wedding organization. Claire visited a single time. She paused in the entranceway of Ethan's hospital cubicle, impeccably dressed in upscale garments that likely cost more than my monthly rent payment, and managed to remain for barely 5 minutes before asserting she needed to leave for a necessary dress fitting. "He is so underweight," she murmured to me while in the corridor, as if this constituted novel information, as though I had not observed my son diminishing daily. "Yes," I confirmed simply, "this must be terribly challenging for you." She touched my upper arm in a motion that may have been intended as comfort, but felt utterly devoid of sincerity. "But you exhibit such resilience, Emily. You have consistently displayed strength." I had encountered that specific adjective so frequently throughout the preceding year, typically articulated by individuals who were thankful they were not compelled to demonstrate it themselves. Sufficiently resilient to cope with this circumstance autonomously. Sufficiently resilient to require no external aid. Sufficiently resilient to observe your child expire while your family allocated a substantial fortune to a celebratory event. "The nuptials are scheduled to occur in 3 weeks, Claire proceeded. "I sincerely hope you will reconsider accepting the role of bridesmaid. It would signify a great deal to me, and perhaps it could benefit you emotionally. You know, an opportunity to commemorate something joyful, to gain a temporary respite from all this intensity, a break, as though I possessed the capability to take a holiday from the imminent death of my child. As though I could assume a cheerful expression and don an excessively priced gown and pretend that all was acceptable while Ethan struggled desperately for every breath he took. "I will give it thought," I responded deceptively because it proved simpler than attempting to articulate the profound impact her remarks had upon my emotional state. The formal wedding invitations had been delivered to my apartment 2 months previously, constructed from thick cardstock featuring luxurious gold embellishment. The complete invitation ensemble likely incurred a cost of $50 per invited attendee. I performed the financial conversions automatically at this point, mentally transforming every cost into equivalent medical procedures we could not finance. The invitations alone could have covered 30 days of physical rehabilitative therapy. The prepayment for the venue might have funded a full year of pharmaceutical supplies. I subsequently ascertained that the final expenditure associated with Claire's wedding amounted to $230,000. $230,000. The numerical figure reverberated ceaselessly within my consciousness like a repeating chant. They had allocated nearly triple the financial resources required to save Ethan's existence toward a singular day devoted to festivity. The location rental alone cost $80,000, approximately the exact sum I had requested assistance for. The flowers tallied $15,000. The catering services cost $40,000. The bridal attire was $12,000. I gradually acquired these specific numerical figures through accidentally overheard conversations and my mother's spontaneous mentions. She possessed zero comprehension of the destructive effect each figure imposed upon me, how every specific dollar amount felt equivalent to a penetrating knife wound. Or alternatively, perhaps she was aware and simply lacked concern. 2 weeks prior to the wedding date, Ethan experienced a particularly adverse day. His cardiac function was failing, the monitors emitting their emergency alerts, medical nurses rushing into the room. I stood directly beside his bed, clutching his tiny hand, and observed the hospital personnel striving intensely to stabilize his deteriorating state. They ultimately succeeded, but Dr. Morrison privately requested my attention immediately afterward. "Emily, he has extremely limited time remaining, a matter of mere days, perhaps 1 week. I strongly recommend you consider contacting family members, anyone who might wish to bid their farewells." I contacted my parents. My father answered the call, sounding preoccupied. "Emily, we are precisely in the middle of organizing the rehearsal dinner preparations. Can this conversation be deferred?" "Ethan is dying," I stated, my voice completely devoid of feeling. "The doctor predicts days at maximum." A noticeable silence followed. Oh, Emily, I offer my deepest apologies. "Do you require us to come over? Do I require your presence? My son, who is their grandson, was in the process of dying, and he was inquiring if I felt their attendance was mandatory." "Yes," I responded. "I believe Ethan would desire to see you. Of course, we will endeavor to visit tomorrow. We have the concluding location inspection in the afternoon, but potentially during the morning hours." They arrived the subsequent day, appearing at 10 o'clock in the morning clutching disposable coffee cups. They remained for 15 minutes exactly. Ethan was minimally responsive, his respiration visibly labored even with the supplemental oxygen set to its highest level. My mother shed a few tears, gently dabbing her eye corners with a facial tissue that likely cost more than the price of Ethan's breakfast meal. My father stood rigidly positioned near the doorway, glancing at his timepiece twice. "We must depart shortly," my father eventually declared. "The professional florist anticipates our arrival promptly at 11. The florist, I reiterated blankly. For the table centerpieces, it is critical that we execute this correctly. There is no allowance for errors this close to the scheduled wedding event. He seemed totally oblivious to the profound irony within his own words, standing inside a room where the ultimate tragic error, the preference for decorative flowers over immediate family welfare, was imminent in claiming its final casualty. They departed following assurances to return soon, assurances I recognized they would not honor. Claire never appeared to say farewell to her nephew. She was excessively engaged with last-minute crises concerning the wedding, such as the situation where the musical ensemble she had employed featured a violinist who had fallen ill and required immediate replacement. This specific issue apparently constituted a crisis worthy of generating multiple frantic phone calls. Ethan passed away on a Tuesday morning, 3 days prior to Claire's Sunday wedding. He expired peacefully while sleeping, his fragile hand resting within mine. The attending nurse who formally confirmed his death wept more profusely than my parents would upon my telephoning them with the news. My mother's initial reaction subsequent to my informing her of Ethan's passing was, "Oh no, oh Emily, absolutely not. What severely inconvenient timing, because the memorial service would inevitably disrupt the wedding preparations. That precise instant marked a foundational change within my emotional core. The crushing sadness was overpowering, yet underneath it, I sensed something novel developing. A frigid, deliberate comprehension. They had conclusively made their choice. Now I would enact my own choice. The burial service was designated for Friday, 2 days preceding Claire's Sunday nuptials. I did not request that my parents modify the wedding date. I did not ask Claire to delay the proceedings. I accurately predicted what their response would be, and I lacked the emotional fortitude to endure their explanations, detailing why their party held greater significance than my son's interment. What caught me entirely by surprise was their demand that I reschedule the funeral itself. My mother contacted me telephonically on Wednesday evening. "Emily, sweetheart, we genuinely need to discuss the arrangements for the funeral service." I was sitting inside Ethan's room, completely encircled by his personal belongings, his cherished collection of plastic dinosaurs, his container of geological specimens gathered at the park, the specialized science kit I had bought him the previous December that he had been too sick to ever utilize. What is the issue with them? Well, Friday presents significant difficulties for us. We have the crucial wedding rehearsal scheduled for that afternoon and the rehearsal dinner occurring in the evening. Everything is already meticulously booked. All required deposits have been settled. Is it conceivably possible for you to relocate the funeral to Thursday or perhaps postpone it until the following week? I gazed fixedly at the wall, unable to emotionally process the words I was absorbing. You are asking me to change the burial date of my son because it conflicts with the pre-wedding rehearsal? It encompasses more than simply the rehearsal, Emily. It involves the entire prearranged schedule. We have guests traveling from distant locations arriving. Jeffrey's extended family is flying in from Atlanta. Your father is scheduled to deliver a formal address at the dinner. We absolutely cannot fail to attend it. Ethan is your grandson, and we will certainly attend to honor his memory, undoubtedly. We will be present, but Thursday would greatly facilitate convenience for every involved party. The funeral service provider should be able to accommodate the adjustment. Every involved party. My voice emerged flat and devoid of emotion. I had transcended feelings of outrage, surpassed the threshold of anguish. I had entered an entirely new emotional territory where the capacity to feel anything seemed unattainable. Every involved party would experience greater convenience if we buried my 8-year-old son one full day, prematurely, so that you can attend the cocktail reception without interruption. Do not engage in exaggerated dramatization, Emily. You are making this situation appear worse than the reality. We are attempting to provide support simultaneously for both you and Claire. Why are you incapable of demonstrating greater flexibility? You are fully aware of the importance this wedding holds for your sister. I abruptly disconnected the call. I did not trust my own ability to articulate anything further. The funeral service remained scheduled for Friday. I personally managed all the preparations, covering the costs with borrowed funds obtained from my school principal, who had displayed greater support over the last year than my own biological parents. It was a modest gathering, including only 20 individuals. My cousin Teresa attended, along with some teaching colleagues from the school and a few parents of Ethan's former classmates. My parents arrived precisely 45 minutes delayed, clothed in garments visibly selected for the subsequent wedding celebrations to occur. They stayed for the brief service itself, but departed immediately afterward, deliberately skipping the small reception I had coordinated at my apartment residence. "We genuinely must depart," my mother stated, pressing a kiss onto my cheek with lips that barely established contact. "Claire is currently experiencing an emotional collapse regarding the seating configuration, but the ceremony was beautiful, Emily. Very appropriate and dignified. Dignified. My son's memorial service was characterized as dignified. I watched them leave, observed them hastily departing toward their crucial engagements and pressing matters, and I perceived an internal part of me solidifying into stone. The devastating grief persisted, overwhelming and total, yet it was now confined, enclosed behind a fortification of icy clarity. Saturday was spent in solitude within my apartment, surrounded by cards expressing condolences and outstanding hospital invoices. The public fundraising drive that had managed to accumulate $12,000 had been fully expended months previously on medical interventions that merely delayed the inevitable conclusion. I owed $73,000 specifically designated as medical debt, had fully utilized credit cards totaling an additional $25,000, and my monthly rent payment was overdue by 2 months. Ethan's demise had not concluded my financial crisis. It had merely rendered it completely meaningless. My mobile device illuminated with incoming communications from distant relatives and acquaintances, inquiring about my well-being, asking if I required anything specific. I offered no reply. What I truly required was impossible to achieve. I needed the return of my son. I needed my parents to have possessed fundamentally different character traits. I needed to awaken and discover that the entirety of the previous year had been an oppressive nightmare. Sunday morning, the designated day for Claire's wedding. I awoke precisely at dawn. I had consciously determined not to dwell upon it, had specifically wished to disregard the fact that it was transpiring, but my mobile device lit up displaying a textual message originating from my mother. "I wish you were here to participate in this extraordinary day. Claire looks absolutely breathtaking." I stared intently at that communication for a considerable duration. "I wish you were here." As though I had simply chosen not to attend the ceremony, as if my absence resulted from a minor scheduling conflict rather than due to having placed my son in the ground 2 days earlier. I got dressed and embarked on a brief walk outside. Columbus presented a lovely appearance in the late stages of October, the foliage transitioning into shades of gold and crimson. Ethan had dearly loved the autumn season. We had made plans to visit the expansive pumpkin harvesting location this year. Just one further activity that would remain unfulfilled forever. My mobile device continued to light up intermittently throughout the day, photographic images originating from the wedding celebration. My mother had integrated me into some form of extended family group text exchange. I observed the images loading sequentially. The wedding location in Tuscany captured during the ideal golden hour light. Claire clad in her costly designer bridal gown, an outfit that exceeded the price of most individuals' automobiles. The floral arrangements were elaborate and conspicuously excessive. The confectionery featuring 5 distinct tiers. The champagne dispensing structure, the musical ensemble performing on an outdoor terrace offering a view of undulating vineyards, $230,000 dedicated to celebration, while my son's remains lay within a grave plot where I could not even afford a proper inscribed headstone yet. I navigated through the digital images with a peculiar sensation of emotional disinterest. Everyone appeared exceedingly content. My father in his formal tuxedo smiling broadly with obvious paternal pride. My mother, impeccably dressed in her attire appropriate for the mother of the bride, which likely cost $3,000. Claire and her newly acquired husband, their faces radiating happiness and future possibility. Distant family members whom I had contacted previously begging for financial assistance, now attired in their finest clothing, celebrating with liquid refreshments that cost more per single bottle than the total they contributed to Ethan's medical fund. One particular image depicted my parents dancing, my mother's head tilted backward in unrestrained laughter. The accompanying textual description read, "Unforgettable day ever. So fortunate." I placed my mobile device down and proceeded toward the restroom. I examined my reflection in the mirror surface. I had shed 15 pounds in body weight over the past 4 weeks, and my orbital sockets were sunken, encircled by deep coloration. I appeared to have aged by 10 years. I appeared exactly like a person who had witnessed their child perish while their immediate family engaged in the celebratory gathering. That evening, isolated in my tiny studio apartment, I committed myself to a silent guarantee. This situation was far from concluded. They believed they could repudiate Ethan's existence, reject me, and progress toward their joyful commemorations without incurring repercussions. They imagined that their financial wealth and elevated social standing and their purely self-centered priorities could effectively insulate them from any requirement for accountability. They held an incorrect assumption. I did not yet comprehend the precise method, but I would force them to grasp the magnitude of their actions. I would ensure they experienced a fraction of the pain I had personally endured. Not precisely retaliation, perhaps, rather equity, a settling of the score. I retrieved a writing pad and began meticulously documenting every element, every dialogue, every refusal of aid, every specific monetary cost. I compiled the chronological sequence of events, the timing of my request for help, the timing of their rejection, the commencement of Claire's wedding preparations, the timing of Ethan's death. I recorded the names of those who attended the funeral service and those who were absent. I sought the precise cost of every expenditure my mother had previously referenced regarding the wedding. I was uncertain of the ultimate application of this compiled data, but I felt a definite need for it. Proof, supporting records, a formal chronicle of everything that had been unjustly taken from Ethan and from myself. My mobile device illuminated once more. Another textual communication from my mother. Back in the USA from Italy, feeling exhausted but tremendously happy. Claire and Jeffrey's initial dance was truly memorable. I will transmit the video recording to you. I formulated a response text. I am pleased to hear you had an enjoyable experience. 3 dots symbolizing typing appeared, vanished, and reappeared once more. Finally, the text arrived. We will stop by next week to ascertain your welfare. I am confident you are experiencing improvement by this time. Experiencing improvement, as though intense sadness operated according to a predetermined schedule. As though precisely 1 week subsequent to the passing of your child, you were anticipated to be completely healed and prepared to hear detailed accounts of how enchanting someone else's celebratory event had been. I provided no reply. The weeks following the conclusion of the wedding elapsed in a monotonous, hazy state. I resumed my professional obligations, navigating through my days like a spectral presence. My students exhibited kindness, treating me with greater gentleness than they had ever demonstrated previously. The school administration had proposed an extended period of paid bereavement leave, but I had declined the offer. I needed the structured routine, needed something to occupy the substantial hours that were formerly dedicated to physician appointments and medication administration schedules and maintaining optimism. My parents contacted me occasionally, brief assessments of my status that felt significantly more like mandatory obligations than authentic concern. How are you holding up? They would inquire and subsequently proceed to fill the ensuing silence with updates regarding Claire's post-nuptial vacation, details about upcoming home renovation projects they were planning, and descriptions of holiday itineraries. They never once acknowledged Ethan. It was as if his existence had never occurred, as if recognizing his absence might potentially disrupt their cheerful disposition. Claire transmitted a single text message. I am sorry for everything that has happened. I sincerely hope we can move beyond this situation. Move past observing my son's final moments. Move past being forsaken by my own immediate family. Move past the verifiable fact that she enjoyed a $250,000 wedding while my child gradually asphyxiated because we lacked the necessary funds for medical intervention. I similarly failed to respond to that message. In December, 2 months following Ethan's demise, my parents extended an invitation for me to join them for Christmas dinner. I nearly refused outright, but my inherent curiosity overcame my hesitation. I wanted to see them face to face, to ascertain how they managed to coexist with the consequences of their decisions. Their house was decorated identically to a display in a high-end magazine featuring a 12-foot evergreen tree professionally adorned with elaborate garlands and illumination fixtures covering every surface. The distinct aroma of costly catered cuisine permeated the interior air. Claire and Jeffrey were already present upon my arrival, appearing suntanned and relaxed following their honeymoon excursion in Bali. Emily, my mother, embraced me warmly, her application of strong perfume overwhelming my senses. I am absolutely delighted that you accepted the invitation. We have genuinely missed your company. I remained stiff and unyielding in her grasp. Thank you for the invitation. The dinner served was extravagant, featuring prime cuts of roast beef, tails of lobster, accompanying dishes I could not identify, and wine that my father proudly declared had a purchase price of $200 per single bottle. Everyone conversed and laughed animatedly, recounting personal anecdotes from the wedding, from the honeymoon trip, and from the ease of their current lives. I sat silently, pushing the food portions around on my plate. Emily, you are unusually quiet, Claire remarked, her voice conveying a concerned inflection that failed to register in her visual expression. Are you truly all right? I am fine. You know, Jeffrey and I were contemplating something. Perhaps you ought to seriously consider relocating elsewhere. A new environment might assist you in the process of emotional recovery. Columbus now contains too many painful memories. I looked directly at her, at this woman who held the title of my sister purely by nomenclature. Where precisely would I go, I do not know. somewhere more economically viable, potentially. I recognize that you are currently experiencing financial strain. Jeffries Corporation maintains a satellite office in Kansas City. The local cost of living there is substantially lower. We could offer assistance in finding suitable housing for you. Help me to move far away. Eliminate the uncomfortable reminder of their past actions. I will contemplate the suggestion, I replied, another outright falsehood. My father cleared his vocal apparatus. Emily, your mother and I have been engaging in dialogue concerning your financial predicament. We are of the opinion that you should seriously consider pursuing formal bankruptcy proceedings. It represents the financially responsible course of action given your accumulated debt, bankruptcy related to your medical invoices. You will never successfully liquidate them on a teacher's remuneration. It is preferable to simply erase the historical record and commence afresh. Commence afresh. As though Ethan's existence represented a correctable error, a financial miscalculation to be officially discounted. We could provide guidance, assist you in locating a competent bankruptcy solicitor. My mother supplemented. Your father maintains acquaintance with several reputable attorneys. I placed my eating utensil down with deliberate precision. You know what intervention would have provided actual assistance? $85,000 15 months ago. The dining table fell into absolute silence. Claire exchanged an uneasy glance with Geoffrey. My mother's plastered smile became motionless. Emily? My father interjected, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of warning. We have previously discussed this matter extensively. Have we truly? Because I have no recollection of us ever genuinely debating it. You simply issued a refusal, and that was the conclusion of the discussion. We arrived at a difficult determination based upon our own fiscal circumstances. Your fiscal circumstances? I made an encompassing gesture around the surrounding room. This current environment does not convey the impression of financial hardship. The $230,000 wedding does not suggest fiscal distress. Claire's complexion flushed deeply. That accusation is unjust, isn't it? I rose swiftly to my feet, my chair producing a loud grating sound against their costly hardwood flooring. You allocated nearly 3 times the sum that could have preserved Ethan's existence toward a singular day. A celebratory gathering, decorative flowers and cake, and a garment you will utilize only once. Emily, that is quite enough, my father stated, simultaneously rising to his feet. His face was visibly red, exhibiting anger. We implemented the decision we genuinely believed was correct. We refused to issue an apology for supporting your sister's personal happiness and Ethan's existence. What precisely about providing support for that? He was already ill, my mother uttered, her voice wavering. The physician indicated there existed no absolute assurance that the procedure would succeed. We were not prepared to dissipate monetary assets on something that might ultimately provide zero benefit. But you were prepared to dissipate double that sum on party paraphernalia and table centerpieces that were destined for immediate disposal the subsequent day. You must depart now, my father ordered. If you intend to be disrespectful, you are required to leave. I retrieved my outer coat. Do not be concerned. I am exiting. You are simply consumed by bitterness because your life trajectory failed to materialize according to your aspirations. Claire shouted after me. It is not our personal fault that you exercised poor judgment. I paused at the threshold and rotated to face them. They were all standing now, forming a unified antagonistic front against me. My parents, my sister, her spouse. All of them situated comfortably, feeling secure, morally justified in their respective positions. Poor judgment, I repeated, such as placing trust in immediate family members, such as assuming genetic relation inherently signified something meaningful, such as believing you would choose the well-being of your grandson over the importance of an extravagant party. I exited into the frigid December darkness and entered my failing automobile. I sat there briefly, observing through the window as they resumed their places for their expensive meal, likely already dismissing my behavior as overly emotional, unstable, and ungrateful. That occasion marked the final time I exchanged verbal communication with any of them for a duration of 4 years. Life continued its trajectory because that is its fundamental nature. I initiated formal bankruptcy procedures as my father had recommended, thereby eliminating the majority of my medical obligations, but simultaneously devastating my creditworthiness for many years to come. I relocated to a more economical apartment situated in a less desirable district. I undertook supplemental tutoring roles during the evenings and summer breaks to ensure financial sustainability. I existed in a state of being, but I did not truly live. I also engaged in methodical planning. I lacked the necessary strength to confront them at that juncture. I was too weakened, too emotionally shattered, too preoccupied with sadness and mere survival, yet I maintained patience. I observed their activities from an impersonal distance, tracking their lives through digital platforms they did not realize I could still access. I meticulously documented every observation, augmenting my collection of detailed notebooks. I waited persistently. Claire became pregnant precisely 1 year subsequent to her wedding celebration. My mother continuously posted frequent updates concerning the pregnancy progress, the baby shower event, and the preparation of the infant's room. The child, a female named Sophia, arrived fully healthy and perfect. The shared photographs showed my parents radiating joy, holding their perceived first grandchild, as though Ethan had never existed in reality, as if Sophia represented their first and sole grandchild. I noticed a specific commentary on my mother's social media posting originating from a distant relative. "Your very first grandchild. How exciting this is." My mother's reply was, "Yes, we are absolutely euphoric." Not a correction provided, not even a simple acknowledgement that another grandchild had lived, had passed away, had possessed inherent significance. Ethan had been deliberately deleted from the collective family narrative. I captured a screen image of the exchange and incorporated it into my evidentiary collection. 2 years subsequent to Ethan's death, I recommenced my academic pursuits, attending virtual classes during nighttime hours, striving toward the attainment of a master's degree in educational administration. I achieved promotion to the position of assistant principal following 3 years. The resulting increase in compensation was moderate, yet it symbolized tangible advancement. I was constructing something new, slowly and with deliberate intent. I also initiated a stringent process of saving monetary assets. Every supplementary dollar was deposited into a segregated account, one that I never accessed for expenses. I did not possess precise knowledge of the ultimate purpose for my savings, but I knew that resources would eventually be requisite. Power necessitates capital. During that extended period, my parents sporadically attempted to establish contact. Birthday greeting cards containing impersonalized messages, Christmas presents delivered via postal service, typically gift vouchers for retail establishments I did not frequent. My father telephoned once specifically to inform me they had initiated a modest college savings plan for Sophia and inquired whether I wished to contribute financial input. I abruptly terminated the call with him. Claire distributed an announcement card upon the birth of her second offspring, a male named Jackson. The card featured a professionally taken photograph of their flawless family unit, dressed in costly attire, displaying genuine smiles. On the reverse side, someone had scribbled, "Hope you are managing well," almost as a supplementary thought. I retained every single card, every announcement, every casual dismissal, all as irrefutable proof. 4 years following Ethan's passing, I held the principal leadership position at a thriving middle school, earning sufficient income to live in material comfort, although I consistently maintained a restrained, modest lifestyle. I had successfully reconstructed myself from an absolute zero state, forging a life characterized by objectives and inherent value, even without the individual who had imparted both to it. I had also consistently maintained surveillance of my family's ongoing activities. Claire's spouse, Jeffrey, had been elevated to the rank of vice president within his corporate structure. They had purchased a significantly larger home situated within an affluent residential sector. My parents had taken up the hobby of golf, obtaining membership at an exclusive country club requiring substantial fees. They engaged in frequent traveling, posting images from various beach locales and prominent European metropolitan centers. Life was favorable for them, indeed better than merely favorable. Subsequently, during the early portion of the spring season, an event occurred that signified a shift. I received an electronic message originating from an email address I failed to recognize. The subject line stated, "Significant family issue." I nearly dismissed it as unsolicited spam, but an intuitive feeling prompted me to open the communication. "Emily, this correspondence is from your cousin Teresa. I am writing because I felt you should be apprised that your father was terminated from his employment 3 months ago. He has made efforts to keep this information undisclosed, but the situation is fundamentally serious. His entire retirement investment portfolio was tied up in his employer's corporate stock, which completely collapsed when the organization declared insolvency. Your parents have suffered the loss of almost all their assets. They are currently facing the legal process of property seizure on their residential home. I am aware that communication between you and them is non-existent, but I felt you would wish to be informed. Your father is excessively proud to solicit assistance, yet they are in dire need of it. Please contact me telephonically if circumstances allow. Sincerely, Teresa." I reviewed the electronic message 3 separate times. Subsequently, I accessed my computer and initiated an investigation. It required minimal time to locate the pertinent news reports. The corporation my father had been employed by, a regional manufacturing entity, had been implicated in a monumental deception scandal. The chief executive officer was confronting serious federal legal accusations. The corporation had officially filed for bankruptcy protection, and numerous employees, numbering in the thousands, had simultaneously lost their jobs and their accumulated retirement savings. My father's specific designation appeared in multiple published articles as one of the senior executives who had completely lost everything. I leaned back into my seat and gazed fixedly at the display screen. After the passage of all these years, after successfully constructing their materially comfortable existence upon the foundation of my son's erased memory, they had suffered the comprehensive loss of it all. Retribution, some might label it. Vindication, others would characterize it. I did not assign a specific name to the emotion I experienced. It was not precisely gratification. It resembled more a definitive acknowledgement. The cosmic order had undergone a transformation, and abruptly I no longer occupied a position of powerlessness. My mobile device produced a ringing sound 1 week later, displaying my mother's designation. I stared at the phone, allowing it to ring continuously until the call was redirected to voicemail. She contacted me again the day following and the day subsequent to that. I never responded to her calls. Then came a physical rapping on my entrance door one particular evening in May. I utilized the peephole apparatus and observed my father standing outside. He looked noticeably older than my recollection, displaying more gray hair, appearing thinner, diminished in stature. I unlatched the door but retained the security chain engaged across the opening. "Yes, Emily, it is me." His voice faltered noticeably when pronouncing my name. "Please, we are in urgent need of communication." "About what matter? May I step inside?" "No." He recoiled slightly. "I acknowledge that circumstances have been challenging between us. I recognize that we have committed errors, but we remain family. We require assistance." "Assistance?" I reiterated the word, which tasted alien upon my tongue. "I experienced job termination. You have probably received this information. We are confronting grave financial turmoil. The house is currently undergoing foreclosure proceedings. Your mother's medical insurance coverage was exhausted, and she has certain health conditions requiring immediate attention. We are soliciting aid from our children. Claire and Jeffrey are providing whatever resources they can spare, but they have their immediate family unit to sustain. We speculated that perhaps you could contribute something, even a minor contribution, potentially a financial loan, which you could reimburse once your personal situation improves." I fixed my gaze upon him through the narrow space afforded by the door chain. "When my personal situation improves, I am aware that you are currently faring better professionally. I learned through digital sources that you hold the position of principal. That must yield a substantial salary. We would absolutely not make this request if we were not utterly desperate." "Desperate?" I inquired softly. "That term is intriguing." I distinctly recall experiencing desperation once myself. His face became flushed with color. "Emily, I beg you. This is highly inappropriate timing to revive past events, is it not?" I offered a slight smile, and it was decidedly not a benevolent expression. "You are soliciting money from me because you are confronting economic catastrophe." "That narrative sounds highly familiar. This predicament is different. In what manner?" "We are your parents, and Ethan was your grandson." The silence extended between us like a deep, impassable fissure. "What precise amount do you require?" I finally inquired. Hope illuminated within his eyes. "We owe about $90,000 on the house. If we could successfully procure that exact sum, we could retain ownership of the property, but any amount of financial aid would be beneficial. Even $20,000 or $30,000 would afford us crucial time to devise a long-term resolution." $90,000, a sum slightly greater than the figure that could have ensured Ethan's survival. I perceived something cold and absolute settling within my chest cavity. "I will give it careful consideration," I stated, and firmly closed the door directly in his face. Securely positioned behind the closed barrier, I leaned against the interior wall and permitted myself a smile. Finally, subsequent to 4 years dedicated to anticipation, to systematic planning, to painstakingly reconstructing my identity from complete devastation, the specific moment I had been awaiting had arrived. Now commenced the process of accountability. I deliberately refrained from contacting my parents for 2 full weeks. Let them endure the wait. Let them speculate constantly. Let them experience the severe anxiety induced by absolute uncertainty. Each day that passed, their predicament intensified in severity. I was aware of this development because I had initiated monitoring of the publicly accessible foreclosure records. Their residential property, the house where I spent my formative years, was officially slated for public auction within 45 days. During that 2-week time frame, my mother attempted contact 17 separate times. My father called on 9 occasions. Claire transmitted 3 lengthy text messages attempting to rationalize that our parents had invariably exerted their utmost effort, that they were fundamentally decent individuals who had made certain errors, that family members are expected to grant forgiveness and mutually assist one another. The inherent contradiction was evidently lost on her perception. I offered no response to any of their communications. Instead, I dedicated my time to comprehensive research. I investigated their financial status as exhaustively as was feasible from an external standpoint. The property possessed an estimated valuation of $320,000, and their outstanding debt totaled $90,000. They possessed residual property value, yet insufficient funds to initiate a new beginning in a comparable location. They would be compelled to relocate to a modest rental unit, perhaps situated in a less desirable vicinity. They would be obliged to learn to subsist exclusively on Social Security benefits and whatever minor income my father could accumulate from a new position, assuming anyone would hire a 63-year-old executive whose reputation was tainted by disgrace. The adjustment would be exceptionally arduous for them, profoundly humbling, constituting a total reversal of the comfortable lifestyle they had constructed. Nevertheless, they would undeniably survive the ordeal. That distinction represented the fundamental difference between their current plight and the fate Ethan had encountered. They were not facing imminent mortality, they were merely facing profound discomfort. On the 15th day precisely, I finally returned my father's telephone call. "Emily," he sounded breathless, palpably desperate. "Thank heavens. I was severely concerned that you would not respond. I've been meticulously contemplating your request, and I could discern the desperate hopefulness in his vocalization, raw and exposed. I require a meeting involving all of you, Mom, and Claire. We need to engage in a formal conversation." "Certainly, absolutely. When? Where shall we convene?" "We are willing to travel to your location, or alternatively we could meet at an impartial setting, whichever location you prefer. My apartment this Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We shall ensure our presence. Thank you immensely, Emily. You possess no idea the profound significance this holds for us." I disconnected the call without offering any verbal response. Saturday arrived, characterized by cold temperatures and gray skies, weather appropriate for the confrontation I had meticulously planned. I had devoted the entire morning to methodical preparation, arranging chairs within my compact living space, placing a storage container upon the low coffee table. I had generated physical copies of crucial documents, organizing them in strictly chronological sequence. Everything was meticulously arranged. They arrived precisely at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, all 3 individuals. My father appeared in a worse condition than when he had appeared at my door previously, his business suit hanging loosely on a physical frame that had clearly lost significant weight. My mother appeared to have aged by a full decade, her hair showing more gray coloration than I remembered, her face etched with profound worry. Claire appeared profoundly ill at ease, dressed excessively formally for the humble state of my apartment, clutching her premium designer handbag like a protective shield. "Emily," my mother started, making a movement as if to initiate an embrace. I took a deliberate step backward. "Please sit down." They situated themselves upon my well-used sofa, sitting close together like young students summoned to appear before a school administrator, which, arguably, was precisely their current role. "You requested $90,000 from me. We are fully cognizant that it represents a significant monetary figure," my father commenced, "but we are prepared to pledge physical assets as security for a formalized loan agreement. We would meticulously repay the principal amount along with accrued interest." "How will you achieve that?" I inquired bluntly. "You possess 0 professional income. Mom is not gainfully employed. What source of funds would you utilize to reimburse me? I am actively seeking employment opportunities. Something suitable will undoubtedly materialize. At the age of 63, with your reputation irrevocably linked to a colossal fraud scandal." He recoiled momentarily. That situation was not my personal fault. I possessed absolutely no awareness of the CEO's illegal activities. Ignorance does not equate to innocence. You occupied a senior executive position. You were ethically obligated to be informed. I retrieved the box from the coffee table surface. "However, our purpose here is not to examine your professional failures. We are gathered here to discuss your request for financial aid. Will you elect to assist us?" my mother asked, her vocal pitch strained. "That is conditional. I require clarification on several points initially." I opened the container and extracted the very first document. "Do you retain memory of this specific conversation?" "The 16th of May, 4 years ago, I came directly to you and requested a specific sum of $85,000 to cover Ethan's essential medical treatment." My mother's complexion paled significantly. "Emily, we have previously analyzed this matter repeatedly." "Have we truly?" Because I maintain the belief that we have not. Not with honesty, not genuinely. I held the document aloft, a printed copy of my initial public fundraising page, with the stipulated cost of the required treatment clearly delineated, $85,000. You explicitly informed me that you could not financially afford the amount, that you were compelled to consider your own retirement planning, that I needed to be acutely realistic. We executed the most prudent determination available to us at that specific moment, my father stated rigidly. Did you, truly? I extracted a subsequent piece of paper. This document constitutes a financial invoice from Claire's chosen wedding organizer, the cumulative expenditure for services. $230,000 paid in full by yourselves 18 months subsequent to your declaration that you could not allocate $85,000 to ensure the survival of your own grandson. Claire rapidly rose from her seat. This is fundamentally unfair. You are deliberately distorting the facts. Resume your seated position, I instructed, my voice sufficiently forceful that she obeyed. I have not concluded my remarks. I extracted additional paperwork, arranging them systematically upon the coffee table surface, one after the other. Wedding location rental fee, $80,000. Floral arrangements, $15,000. Catering services, $40,000. Bridal attire, $12,000. Professional photographic services, $8,000. Entertainment provisions, $10,000. Should I persist in listing the figures? What exactly is your desired outcome from us? My father demanded with agitation. A formal apology? Very well, we apologize sincerely. We made a grave error. Is that what you wish to hear? An error? I stated softly. You genuinely consider prioritizing an extravagant celebration over your grandson's survival to be merely an error. We lacked certainty that he was destined to pass away. My mother whispered weakly. Yes, you were certain. The medical doctors informed you directly. I informed you repeatedly. You were cognizant of the situation, and you lacked sufficient concern to provide assistance. I extracted one more document, the one which caused the greatest anguish to observe. A photograph depicting Ethan confined to his hospital bed, captured exactly 2 weeks before his death. This is the individual that $85,000 would have saved. This specific child, your grandson. Do you remember his face? My mother began to weep openly. Claire deliberately averted her gaze. My father stared intensely at the photograph with an expression I found impossible to interpret. Emily, please, my mother pleaded through her tears. We acknowledge that we utterly failed you. We know we should have acted more decisively, but we are incapable of altering the historical past. We can only humbly request your merciful compassion in the present moment. Compassion. I carefully positioned the photograph back into the container. That concept is highly intriguing. I possess no recollection of receiving much compassion when I appealed to you for support. When I liquidated all material possessions I owned, when I maximized every single credit card to its limit, when I relocated to a small studio apartment and consumed inexpensive sustenance so I could afford Ethan's prescribed medications. We failed to fully grasp the severity of the crisis. My father claimed, Did you truly fail to grasp it? I communicated the severity to you numerous times. I physically presented the medical invoices to you. I clearly articulated that absent the specialized treatment, he would not survive. What aspect of that communication was ambiguous? Silence persisted, but you possessed a complete comprehension of the overriding importance of Claire's wedding event. You understood perfectly that the table centerpieces necessitated absolute precision, that the venue had to achieve perfection, that your daughter merited the absolute best monetary assets could procure. I resumed my seating position opposite them, my voice characterized by tranquility and deliberate pacing. This is the conclusion I have reached over the past 4 years. You refrained from assisting Ethan because you consciously chose not to. The issue was not fundamentally about the monetary assets. You demonstrably possessed the necessary capital. You proved that conclusively. The issue was purely about deliberate choice. You selected what held the greatest significance for you personally. That assertion is untrue, Claire protested vehemently. Were they attempting to safeguard their retirement security because they willingly expended almost triple their expressed concerns regarding retirement on your wedding celebration? Mathematical principles do not permit falsehood, Claire. Stated priorities do not permit falsehood. My father inclined his body forward. Emily, I fully comprehend that you are enraged. You possess every justification for that emotion. But are you genuinely preparing to penalize us now, at the precise time when we require your help most critically? Are you intending to act with the same cruelty that you ascribe to us? Cruel, I responded, tasting the sound of the word. Does it constitute cruelty to implement choices founded upon what holds importance for you? Is it cruel to determine that your available resources should be allocated towards supporting your own personal priorities rather than addressing someone else's immediate crisis? Because that represents the precise instruction you imparted to me. That is the fundamental lesson you bestowed upon me during the period when Ethan was dying. Therefore, you definitively refused to assist us. My mother stated flatly, I did not convey that definitive refusal. I carefully pulled the storage container closer and withdrew a pre-written financial instrument. I maintained the willingness to provide you with $90,000. Immediate, fervent hope blossomed across their facial expressions. Nevertheless, I continued, certain prerequisites must be met. Anything, my father rapidly consented. We will affix our signatures to whatever stipulations you demand. Amortization schedules, associated interest rates, collateralized assets. The transaction does not involve reimbursement. I placed the check upon the table surface separating us. The primary prerequisite is that you formally recognize, at this precise moment and location, that you consciously prioritize Claire's wedding celebration over the survival of Ethan, that you possess the funds and adamantly decline to provide assistance. I require a verbal articulation of this fact from you. They gazed fixedly at me. Claire directed her attention toward her parents. You are under no obligation to comply with this. She is deliberately attempting to disgrace you. Yes, I conceded, I am intentionally humiliating you, just as you thoroughly humiliated me when I desperately requested support, when I stood in your entranceway displaying exorbitant medical invoices and you instructed me to maintain realistic expectations, when I buried my son entirely alone because you were attending a scheduled rehearsal dinner. Consequently, yes, I demand that you articulate aloud that you implemented a choice and Ethan perished as a direct consequence of that choice. My father was now weeping more intensely. My father's countenance was deeply flushed, yet they desperately required that financial instrument. They required it with extreme urgency. We selected the wedding, my father finally admitted, his voice barely audible above a whisper. We possessed the financial resources, and we deliberately chose to allocate them toward Claire's wedding celebration instead of funding Ethan's medical procedure. And I endorsed that choice, and he passed away because we didn't help. Mom, I looked directly at my mother. We should have offered assistance to you, she murmured softly. We should have ensured his survival. We made an error. I turned my attention toward Claire. And you? What is your role in this situation? I was unaware of the situation, she quickly asserted. I did not know they had outright refused to provide assistance to Ethan. Didn't you truly? Did you never once question the source of the capital funding your excessively elaborate wedding? Did you never find it anomalous that I requested a postponement of your bridal shower because Ethan was confined to the hospital facility and you declined? Did you never express reservations about scheduling your wedding celebration 3 days following the burial of your own nephew? She offered no reply. Here is the secondary prerequisite, I resumed. You accept this monetary sum, you retain possession of your home, and you permanently cease all forms of contact with me immediately. No greetings cards for birthdays, no gifts exchanged during Christmas, no telephone calls whatsoever. You remove my presence from your lives completely, mirroring the manner in which you deliberately eliminated Ethan from your collective memory. You revert to the pretense that my existence is irrelevant. Emily, you cannot genuinely intend that requirement. My mother protested vehemently. We are fundamentally family. No, I corrected her immediately. We merely share genetic material. Family represents something entirely distinct. Family members demonstrate consistent presence. Family members willingly make personal sacrifices. Family members do not permit children to succumb while simultaneously organizing festive events. I stood up and proceeded toward my entrance door, opening it widely. Those constitute my mandated conditions. Accept the check or reject it entirely. You have a maximum of 60 seconds to finalize your decision. They exchanged intense glances with one another, an unstated communication unfolding through quick visual exchanges and subtle facial expressions. I observed their rapid internal calculation process, witnessing them weighing their individual dignity against their severe need. The decision consumed 43 seconds. My father retrieved the check. We consent to your conditions, he pronounced, his voice hollowed. Excellent. There is a legal document situated on the table directly beside the check. It represents a formal contractual agreement stipulating that you shall initiate no further communication with me. Sign it immediately. They affixed their signatures without undertaking a complete reading of the document, an action which conveyed everything I required concerning the true depth of their desperation. My father's signature exhibited obvious tremulousness. My mother struggled immensely to firmly grip the writing instrument through her weeping. Claire signed with overtly angry, hurried motions, her face vividly red with barely contained fury. Upon completion of their signing, I retrieved the document and provided them with the financial instrument. You are now permitted to depart. Emily, my father commenced, but I interrupted him immediately. You formally agreed to the stipulated conditions? Zero contact mandates, absolutely zero contact. Leave now. They exited quietly, my mother audibly sobbing, my father's shoulders conspicuously slumped, Claire walking stiffly alongside them. I firmly closed the door behind their retreating figures and secured the locking mechanism. Subsequently, I walked into my bedroom and accessed my laptop computer. I displayed my banking account interface and observed the displayed balance. The $90,000 I had just transferred to them had been moved from my savings reserve earlier that morning. That particular account now displayed a residual balance of $12,000. Years of meticulous saving, of adhering to modest living standards, of setting aside every spare dollar were now depleted to almost nothing. However, I had not concluded my plan. I accessed my electronic mail application and drafted a comprehensive message addressed to my cousin Teresa, the single family member who had demonstrated any authentic concern for my welfare over the preceding years. I attached a document, a formal correspondence I had authored several months earlier, waiting for the opportune moment to transmit it. Cousin Teresa, I felt compelled to inform you about the authentic circumstances surrounding Ethan's passing. I have included an attached comprehensive chronological sequence of events encompassing all specific requests I made for support and the exact responses I received. I have also incorporated supporting documentation detailing the expenses my parents incurred during that identical period, specifically related to Claire's wedding celebration. I deemed it necessary for the extended family to know the unvarnished truth. Please distribute this communication to anyone you believe should review it. With affection, Emily. I executed the sending command. The document I had attached was exhaustive in its scope. Every personal dialogue, every rejection of assistance, every specific wedding expenditure, every outstanding hospital invoice, the photograph depicting Ethan in his hospital bed, digital screenshots of my mother's social media posts referring to Sophia as her initial grandchild, the time sequence demonstrating how my parents opted to attend Claire's rehearsal dinner in lieu of Ethan's funeral gathering, every detail meticulously arranged in sequential order, presenting undeniable evidence. My cousin Teresa possessed an extensive familial social network. She exemplified the type of individual who transmits electronic correspondence to dozens of people and shares virtually all information across digital platforms. By the subsequent day, everyone would be fully informed, my parents' acquaintances, their exclusive country club associates, their religious congregation, their immediate neighbors. The stark reality would disseminate with extreme rapidity. The financial instrument I had provided them would be successfully processed. They would successfully retain ownership of their house. But they would suffer the loss of something significantly more valuable. Their publicly perceived reputation, their comfortable placement within social circles, the favorable image they had carefully cultivated of being nurturing, affectionate parents and grandparents. Everyone would come to know the true priorities they had selected, the values they had genuinely cherished. A rap sound occurred at my entrance door precisely 1 hour later. I utilized the peephole and observed Claire standing there alone, her face expressing intense fury. I opened the door slightly, but deliberately did not extend an invitation for her to enter. You formally executed a contract agreement not to initiate contact with me. That specific email you transmitted, you cannot legally do that action. You are actively destroying their lives. I am merely stating the factual truth. A crucial distinction exists between those things. You are intentionally vengeful and cruel in your actions. You are systematically demolishing them, motivated purely by malice. No, I responded calmly. I am providing them with precisely the outcome they bestowed upon me. Repercussions. Personal actions generate consequences, Claire. They executed specific choices, and now they are compelled to endure the outcomes, just as I have been compelled to endure the experience of observing my son pass away. They provided you with $90,000. They returned to me a mere fraction of what they collectively took from Ethan and from myself, and they only performed that action because they were left with no alternative recourse. If they were not utterly desperate, would they have offered assistance? Both of us know the undisputed answer. You are never going to relinquish this issue, are you? You are planning to perpetually despise us. I do not harbor hatred for you, I stated, and realized that assertion was accurate. Hatred necessitates emotional engagement. I no longer possess any emotional concern regarding any of you. You permanently ceased being my family unit the day you prioritized an organized celebration over the continued existence of my son. Currently, you are merely strangers who coincidentally share my familial designation. Mother is profoundly distraught. Father appears emotionally shattered. Was this entire process worth the resulting damage? Address that inquiry to Ethan and see if he deems it worthwhile. Oh, wait. That is an impossibility because he is deceased. Claire's facial structure collapsed inward. You truly embody the coldness they described. Cold, my emotional core was irreparably damaged 4 years previously, and you were not present to witness that breakage. You were excessively occupied planning your ideal wedding and constructing your ideal existence. Therefore, you do not possess the right to employ that specific term with me, Claire. You are not authorized to use that word. She rotated and walked away from the doorway, and I secured the door for the final occasion upon my biological relatives. Over the subsequent months, I received information through unofficial channels regarding their fate. My parents were indeed subjected to profound social isolation. Acquaintances stopped initiating telephone calls. The membership at the exclusive country club was subtly not renewed by the management. Attendance at their religious institution became sufficiently uncomfortable that they ceased attending services. They successfully maintained possession of their residence, but it effectively transformed into a form of confinement, a place where they were compelled to live daily with the ramifications of their decisions. My father eventually secured employment working as an independent consultant, earning a mere fraction of his prior executive compensation. My mother developed pervasive anxiety symptoms and initiated therapeutic treatment sessions. Claire and Jeffrey relocated to a different political division, deliberately establishing geographical separation between themselves and the social scandal. Their customary Christmas greeting cards, which had once been elaborate annual productions, ceased arriving altogether. I learned that my mother informed people I was deceased, asserting that this provided an easier explanation than detailing why her daughter adamantly refused any association with her. I hypothesized that in a symbolic sense I was indeed deceased to them. The daughter who consistently demonstrated appreciation for small favors, who acquiesced to occupying a secondary position, who had internalized her profound suffering to maintain domestic tranquility, that specific individual no longer existed. Regarding my personal life, I persisted in building my future. I tentatively engaged in dating eventually, albeit with caution. I forged genuine friendships, the type of individuals who provided support when circumstances became difficult. I traveled to global destinations that Ethan would have adored and dispersed his cremated remains in picturesque locations across the planet. I lived existence for both of us simultaneously. The $90,000 I had transferred to my parents proved to be a worthwhile investment. Not fundamentally because they merited receiving assistance, but because the transaction afforded me emotional closure. I had decisively demonstrated that I was the morally superior individual, the one capable of demonstrating compassion, even when zero compassion had been extended toward me. And subsequently, I had intentionally distanced myself, abandoning them to confront the oppressive consequences of their prior actions. Some observers might characterize my behavior as malicious, that genuine spiritual forgiveness mandates complete release, assistance rendered without demanding conditions. But those specific observers never personally watched their child succumb to death in isolation while their family was engaged in celebration elsewhere. They never faced the impossible decision between securing electrical utility services and purchasing essential medication. They never had to bury their infant child utilizing borrowed funds while possessing the certain knowledge that $250,000 had been allocated for decorative cakes and floral displays. I provided my parents with the specific thing they had requested, but strictly according to my own defined terms. I had successfully fulfilled my mandatory obligation as their offspring, one ultimate time, and subsequently I had permanently closed that familial chapter, exactly mirroring the way they had definitively closed the door on Ethan when his need for them was most critical. Ultimately, seeking retribution was not rooted in malice. It was fundamentally about achieving equity, about establishing balance, about ensuring that personal actions invariably encountered appropriate consequences. They imparted the severe lesson that family connections were conditional, that expressions of affection possessed strict boundaries, that certain human lives held greater importance than others. I simply returned the substance of their own lessons, contained within a financial instrument they could not afford to reject, and an undeniable reality they possessed no mechanism to evade. And I advanced into a future where their presence would never be included, carrying the cherished memory of Ethan perpetually with me, finally attaining inner peace.